So thank you to everybody who is joining us today as we reconvene by popular demand with this extraordinarily expert panel. So with this slightly longer session, we plan to provide more detail on policy, strategy and operations, but also important information on what we have all learned since October, as so much has moved on, both in India and in the UK. So as before, we're going to have short accounts from each of the expert speakers, and it will be very short because we want plenty of time for questions at the end. I will keep my comments to a minimum. That will help to maximise the time for questions. I'll focus on moderating the sessions. Please do post your questions so that we get a chance to moderate them. And I would particularly ask you to make sure that they're very focused and that any responses that you want to make in reply to the expert commentary are very brief because we've got such a lot to cover. Okay, so on that note, I'm absolutely delighted to ask Alison to lead off, as before, with an overview of the current policy perspective, how we keep to the critical path, and an update on who's doing what in India. Thank you, Alison.
Great. Thank you very much, David. And I'm really happy to be joining you from our British Council office here in Chennai. It's 6 p.m. here, but delighted to be joining you all from all over the world. Good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. So last time we spoke, I talked about three main areas. I talked about the context and the demand for higher education in India. I talked a little bit about the different models that UK universities were exploring with their counterparts in India. I talked about the UK offer and how relevant that is for the needs that are currently that we're currently seeing here, specifically focusing on the importance of thinking about consortia-led approaches and thematic approaches and making sure that you identify the right part of India to engage with. We also talked a little bit about equity and the importance of widening access, and we shared a few lessons learned. So since then, we've moved into the 5th year of the National Education Policy 2020 in India. It's a pioneering policy, as we all know, that really puts internationalization of higher education at the centre of the reform agenda, not just for the education sector, but obviously more broadly, aligning with the country's goals to be a developed nation by 2047. So 4 main things have happened since October that I wanted to highlight. One is the level of diplomatic engagement that's really ramping up since the new government in the UK has moved into position. And both prime ministers met on the sidelines of the G20 in Brazil, made a commitment there and publicly announced that they plan to take forward a very ambitious new UK-India comprehensive strategic partnership. It was announced that that partnership would focus on a whole range of different areas, from trade and investment, security and defence, but education was also one of the areas highlighted. And it was noted that the deep cultural ties between our countries really provide the foundation for that more ambitious comprehensive strategic partnership, which is super exciting. The second development, we've had a number of different ministerial visits and campus developments. Minister West came to India in November. She spent a morning at the British Council and chaired a higher education roundtable where she heard from representatives across the ecosystem of higher education and really was able to understand the needs and the demands from the India side from the UK, and also had asks of the India side too around how we can learn from India's entrepreneurial mindset, etc. Australian universities are really striding ahead. Deakin University has now celebrated its 1st year. Very recently, the University of Western Sydney announced plans to open a new campus in Greater Noida in Uttar Pradesh. So the context is getting more and more intense in terms of the interest from a range of countries, not just us in the UK. A number of collaborative initiatives have been announced. The British Council signed an MOU with the University Grants Commission. This is a commitment to help improve mutual understanding of both of our education the approaches that we've, but also to support capacity building in internationalization, focusing on international officers. And the 4th area are strategic developments in the UK. So we know that the international education strategy is being hotly debated and worked on by colleagues across DBT, Department for Education, FCDO. very much led by Sir Steve Smith, who has been reappointed as champion. So the Soft Power Council, I think, also just underscores the relevance and importance of education as a not just a tool for mutual growth, but also soft power in the long term. Massive interest. We've got 14 UK Vice Chancellors here next week, probably the same number of Pro VCs and Directors International. You may have seen yesterday the University of Leicester announced a very innovative new model in South India, in Tamil Nadu, with Apollo University, looking at a research collaboration, a centre of excellence. So there's so much happening, and it's just really hard to stay on top of it. So I would really encourage you to register for the British Council's newsletter, and you'll get the link for that in the chat in a moment. So the British Council is really working together across the whole of the India network of all of the UK and India departments to identify mechanisms and ways that we can make it easier for you to engage in India. That's not to replace or offer a service that is offered by different agencies or organisations. This is really just insight and advice around protocols, the cultural approach, the ways that you should be engaging, what level of entry do you take into a system, into a state government. And our High Commissioner will be giving an address at the QS Summit in Goa next week, where she'll be announcing those new protocols and guidelines that we hope will make it easier for you. And we look forward to your feedback on those. Our national and state government partners are really keen to understand how to get the confidence that they need to be able to provide the support that you're looking for. They're very keen to have British Council, DBT colleagues, FCDO colleagues engaged in the conversation. So we want to work with you to make sure that we can provide the right kind of representative when you're having those conversations. I think finally, the thing I wanted to highlight were three sort of learnings before I finish. At the South Asia British Council Deep Dialogue, looking at T&E that happened just before Christmas, two of the three main recommendations I think are really important to highlight. They're about the fundamental role of trust and respect in establishing mutually beneficial relationships, and the need for us to be deploying culturally resilient and astute leaders who can navigate complex environments, particularly in India, where you have a federal system with education nationally and at the state level. So that's a really, really important area that we need to keep hold of. But three sort of strategies for success before I finish. First of all, make sure you align your initiatives with the national education policy priorities, use the language, clearly demonstrate how your work and your partnership is supporting those broader goals, as well as the local goals of state industrial strategies, wherever you may decide to collaborate. Make sure that you're thinking through your announcements and that you're getting advice from colleagues in India around the ways that you are planning to frame your announcements, the language that you're using, so that we can ensure it resonates locally, that it doesn't set hairs running if you're talking about different things which might confuse stakeholders here. And also we can amplify your announcements too to get you greater visibility and reach. And finally, really think carefully about how you focus on employability, but also on entrepreneurship. A reminder, there are 63 million enterprises in India, and increasingly young people are graduating and looking not necessarily to be working for others, but actually creating jobs for others in their communities. So entrepreneurship and job creation is super, super important for Indian graduates. I think I'll leave it there for now, David, and happy to come back to questions.
That's fantastic, Alison, and really looking forward to the Q&A, and great to hear you expressing the continued excitement and dynamism of the opportunities, but equally I think I heard the importance of being professional and purposeful, and being clear this is not a time for speculative developments. And wonderful finally to hear the British Council's building that sort of support ecosystem, which reminded me of what you did in China 15 years ago, where everybody went to the British Council, and fantastic to hear you're with us on the journey. Okay, at that point we're going to move to Arushi. He's going to give us that on the ground perspective from a leading legal firm as we understand how we can best navigate the regulatory environment and make sure that governance is effectively implemented. Arushi, if I could ask you to kick off now.
Thank you so much, David, and thank you, Alison, for setting the context. I think it was brilliant and very, very informative. I think just in terms of what the regulatory environment in India looked like, I'm going to borrow from the session because it's very apt. The regulatory environment in India today is strategic and impactful, and there's a reason I say so. Between the time since we had the national education policy till now, just in about 5 years, we have revamped our regulations which permit collaborations, dual degree, and joint degree programs. They have been made light touch and easy. Within the course of the past 4 years, we have regulations which allow gift campuses. We have regulations which allow campuses to be set up in mainland India. This is all very strategic because this is to give implementation to the national education policy. At the same time, having regulations without any force, without any output, has no bearing to it. It's not that we just have regulations. Our Indian government is working very hard to make sure that our regulations are actually implemented. We have two functional campuses in Gift City, foreign university campuses in Gift City as of date, and many universities eyeing Gift City as a campus. We have Southampton, I'm sure Andrew will speak more about it, but at the same time, many others who have made strategic plans to set up campus in the country. So at this juncture, India is definitely a hotbed as far as university collaborations, as far as university campuses, any kind of TNE arrangements are concerned. Now, while I say so, I think there are certain things that one should consider from a legal perspective, and I don't wish to be too technical about it. But India is a very different ball game. There can be cultural differences. There can be the way just the way we draft our agreements, just the way we manifest our thoughts. There could be various differences to it. Many more often than not, I hear about light touch agreements, and I personally don't prefer to draft like 100-page document and overburden, but your agreements are important because these are the documents which set out your rights and obligations. Nobody wants to talk about a termination eventuality, but that's what comes in handy when you want to look at successful exits. Now, India is nuanced in the sense that we have many laws. Alice spoke about the marketing material and the messaging being right. We have robust consumer protection laws. They regulate how we market, what we say, what we don't say. These things are very important from an India perspective. Now, many universities, when they're looking into India, they're thinking about, getting funds into India because that's important from an operationalization perspective. Getting money into India, getting money out of India is regulated. If you're looking at getting any kind of contributions or donations into India, that's severely regulated, and you will have, several permissions to seek. So I think India is a very, nuanced territory in the sense that we have many laws, and sometimes the complexity of laws require you to get, specific legal advice. So don't miss on that is what my general advice is. But just on the parting note, I think when looking at India, it is also important to think about what is your structure to look at India, and that depends on your model. If you're doing maybe an online arrangement, if your intention is student recruitment, if you're looking at India from a marketing strategy perspective, do you even need an entity in India? If you're looking at, setting up a campus or doing something more meaningful like a center of excellence, etc., we can consider between for-profit, not-for-profit structures, etc. So these are strategic inputs that advisors can help you with, and which can be very useful in the long run. So maybe I'll take a pause here, David, and I can come back later for questions.
That's great, Rishi, and really important point there about this is not something you can do on the cheap or, as I mentioned earlier, speculatively. You need to have top quality advisors. I mean, you mentioned in the last session how the rules were, this was more outcome based rather than rules based. I mean, which is a difference from China. We all knew what we had to do in China. Here, and as Sam told us that at the beginning, there's a sort of broad strategic objective, and you can reach that outcome in many different ways, but you absolutely have to get people on the ground who know how to do this. Having a sort of jobbing Indian strategy person just not going to cut it. So if we talk then about purposefulness and professionalism, that's an absolute wonderful entree to Andrew, who's kindly going to update us with the massive progress that Southampton has made. And also, in doing so, talk more broadly about the lessons to be learned for others. Very kind of you, Andrew, to take that broader perspective and to talk about effective relationship management, institutional leadership, and how you deliver on an institutional plan. Thank you for your perspective, which we're delighted to hear about now.
So thank you very much, David. That's a very nice welcome, and hello to all of you on the call. So last time when we had the UKI event on, I think it was the 8th of December, in Senate House, I talked about three things. I talked about why India. I talked about how the strategy for the university puts international campus development and globalization at the heart of our approach. And I also talked about where we got to in terms of development of the campus in India. I'll spend a very short amount of time on the first two, and I'll talk a little bit more about updates in terms of how we've moved on over the last 7 weeks or 6.5, 7 weeks or so. So if anything, and this reinforces a point that Alison was making at the beginning, and actually Arushi as well, if anything, India has become even more of a hotspot in terms of higher education expansion, growth, and development. And that can be seen in many different ways. It can be seen in terms of international flows of students. It can be seen in terms of levels of engagement with University Grants Commission interest in establishing campuses. But what it can also be seen is in terms of the multifaceted nature of relationships that UK and international universities are now developing in India. So the most embedded institutions now have taken advantage of the national education policy and have a whole range of different partnerships from research through education through joint programs. So I think that's really important to come back to, because you only really embed and become part of an ecosystem when you have multiple partnerships and multiple relationships. But the fundamentals are still there. There are still many, many, many highly capable, highly talented young people leaving secondary education with really strong academic performance and looking for places in higher education. And demand at this point is still, if anything, is accelerating, exceeding supply. So the fundamentals are still there in terms of why India. For us as Southampton, it's been a very positive process. What I talked about in the last session was that we have as a key part of our strategy to establish 3 additional campuses by 2030. India was the priority and is the priority, and then one that we're focusing on particularly. It has affirmed and reinforced the strategy inside the university. And the really interesting thing is what it's done is it's started to really mainstream a conversation around what globalizing and what becoming international as a university is, and what that means in terms of the types of institution that you become and the types of research, education, enterprise and impact that you undertake, and how that can be both cross-border and also increasingly localized through the campuses. So in some ways it's reinforced a lot of the strategic aspirations that we've had in a very positive way. In terms of the third area, in terms of the campus itself, we submitted to run the chronological timeline very quickly. The full regulations for setting up and operating a campus of a foreign higher education institution were finally published in the India Gazette at the end of November 2023. We submitted an application on January 31st, 24. We received confirmation from the University Grants Commission, UGC, on the 2nd of February. We presented our case for the campus on the 2nd of April, and we received the confirmation and the approval for the campus on the 27th of August. And in between, there was a significant general election, and actually in India, it's multiple general elections because of the size of the population. So that's moving quickly. One of the key items or aspects of an approval for a campus in India is that once the letter of intent to approve is provided, the timeline to establish the campus is 2 years. And so effectively you have a choice of, do you go for the next entry cohort in 12 months on, or in the following cycle, do you go for the one after? And what I would suggest is to any colleagues who are at universities looking to submit an application, or perhaps in the process of, it's useful to think about that timing when you submit, and then when you expect to get the result back, because actually that 2 years can be really one entry point. We decided to go for end of August 2025. That's 12 months. That is an ambitious target, and we've been working at pace, making significant number of appointments of professional services and academic staff, working with our partners who are on this call at OIEG on the premises and the facilities, looking to build the delivery structure, and making those key senior leadership role appointments that will drive the development of the campus. Recruitment in market is very interesting, huge amount of interest, and really very much focusing on responding to that interest in terms of turning around offers quickly and working with applicants through a set of immersive applicant days and workshops, some of which will be run early next week and have been run on a monthly basis since then. So working quickly through, but I think my headline, and I'll stop here, is that we have very positive signs already that the potential that we and others have identified in India in terms of recruiting really high quality students and in terms of recruiting really high quality staff, not just from India, but internationally as well, is absolutely being borne out at this stage. And that's a good affirmation of the strategic decision to look at India as a priority country. My only final comment would be that we've chosen an ambitious date to launch, but India is so dynamic that once other universities achieve campus approvals, because they will be prepared for rapid, professional, structured, absolutely clear and explicit implementation, because some of the points that Arusha was making around tax, legal structure, compliance are going to be as important, but delivering a campus in full at distance is also something that has a high delivery requirement. So in some ways, my key point will be that securing an approval to start a campus is not the end of the cycle, it's actually the beginning, and from there the real business starts. Thank you, David, and thank you, colleagues.
Thank you, Andrew. And as always, strategy crucial, but high quality execution absolutely essential. The thing I think that I really took home from what you said was that absolutely there is an activity to be implemented rapidly and at high quality, but actually it's the internal conversation, that rethinking of the role and purpose of Southampton going forward that is really different. And also actually what you're talking about is a level of agility within the institution that we normally equate with former polytechnics because they've had to be, but actually what you're saying is big beasts like yourself now evidence that agility, and that's going to open up real opportunities. I think some really interesting things for us to unpack there. You talked about partnership, and that's a great segue into Delia, who is helping as part of the Oxford International team to operationalise the activity, and is going to talk about that and more broadly about her long-standing, was it almost 2 decades of experience of operating in India and some of the other work that you're doing. So Delia, if I could ask you to take on from where Andrew so expertly left off.
Thanks, David, and thanks so much for inviting me back to be part of this panel, because the range of expertise from my colleagues is incredible, and I've got the sort of the slot now to come in behind these great people. But just to pick up on what Andrew was saying, and as you said, I'm working as part of the OIEG team that is helping support the development and the establishment of the campus, and it is an amazing opportunity. So I am very grateful to be now part of that team. And I think just building on what Andrew said, and to say that, you know, one of the key things that I've observed is how the commitment, first off, from Southampton at every level, from the senior leadership right the way through professional services and academic colleagues. This is a whole university effort to contribute to the establishment of this campus, building on their experiences in other places where they have other campuses, but really very focused on tailoring what they will develop and establish to the needs of India. So that has been a fantastic sort of window into how the university is approaching this, strategically led, but also operationally focused. So it is strong in all those areas. And working as a partner in that has been very, very important because there is a true partnership. So I think that's, again, another observation to make. And it applies not just to this partnership, but across the board, in my experience of thinking about your TNE strategies, your TNE work. It's about finding the right partners, and that can be the right partner in country, it can be the right delivery partner, it can be another institution, it can be a private provider, it can be consortia. All of those models, as Alison touched on, will be needed to meet the needs in India. But the essence of it is approaching that partnership in that true spirit. And I think this again was mentioned by Alison, of trust and respect, and that's absolutely essential. And particularly when we're doing it at speed. And India is a fast-moving place. It can be very slow-moving in some ways, and having lived there, I can say that. But in many aspects, India moves quickly. You have to be able to move quickly as well to respond to that requirement. So this is happening at pace. Setting this up from literally ground zero in 12 months, as Andrew said, is an amazing challenge, but can only be delivered because of those close working relationships, both internally in the university and with ourselves in terms of the work that we're doing. Some other reflections on the interest and the excitement. Having been out on the ground in India with colleagues from Southampton, I'm sure they will support this. We were absolutely overwhelmed by the level of interest that happened. Students, parents, counsellors, advisors, and other stakeholders, all incredibly excited about this new opportunity, but also there was still some, a little bit of concern and reticence. So, they wanted to understand what it was going to look like. What's the nitty-gritty of all of this? Who will be, doing what, and how will it all work? So you do really need to ensure that you've got a very, very strong communication strategy. You've got to be clear what you're putting out there. As Arushi said, India has quite a high level of consumer protection. So everything around what you say in your prospectus, for example, is going to be absolutely critical, and you need to be taking the best advice you can get about how that works. So lots going on, happening at pace, building the team both between Southampton and Oxford, but also building the team, the leadership team at the campus, as Andrew said. We've got, I think we've just started to really bring on board those key leadership colleagues now, who are going to be the ones who are at the front of this development as we move into the next phase, and that's fantastic. And again, them working together. Recruiting academic staff, and I think David asked me to talk about, how that works. Recruiting students and academic staff. You are in a competitive marketplace. You're a new thing. So you've got to really be able to persuade people that this is an exciting opportunity that will benefit their careers, and that's staff and students. So, that is not just one or the other. It's across the board. But what is not negotiable when you're having any of these conversations is high quality education. And of course, that's what Southampton's commitment is. High quality research informed education. And that, again, brings us round to something that other colleagues have touched on, which is the importance in India of industry links, research links, employability, and entrepreneurship. And that, again, is one of the key things that Southampton has a commitment to at the UK campus in terms of their triple helix approach, and that's being transferred and implemented in India. So it's not something different for India. It's part of the essence of Southampton that's there, and that will meet the aim, and the commitment is to meet those needs about employability for students, links with industry, strong academic staff, and entrepreneurship being an integrated part of everything that is going on in terms of the curriculum. So all of that is happening at once, at pace, while a campus is being developed, while practical things around bank accounts, entities, or the regulatory environment is all going ahead, and it's wonderful to be part of it. And I feel quite a fraud here talking about this when I've got Andrew on the call, but hopefully he's not going to completely disagree with everything that I've said there. Finally, very quickly, because I'm conscious of time, I just want to finish off by talking about the fact that campus development is an amazing thing, and it is an incredible experience and a credible project to be involved in. But there are lots of other ways in which you can be involved with India, as both Alison and Rushi and Andrew have touched on. There are many ways. It's, you know, dual degrees, joint degrees, student exchanges, lots and lots of different ways you can be involved. India has a very broad church now in this place. It also is very important to remember India is very diverse. So don't just think about the usual suspects. And as Alison said, the state governments are very important when you're looking at opportunities across India, focusing on what your objectives are, what the needs are for India in terms of what are the economic priorities, what are the needs both of the state governments, the individuals in terms of their own career opportunities. So all of those things should come in, be clear, be committed. It's an amazing experience. Do not expect it to be a walk in the park, because it won't be, but it will actually benefit your institution in so many different ways. But one thing it won't be is quick fix financial payback in the short term. This is resource intensive, it is medium to long term, and it requires a whole institution approach. Thanks, David.
It's a bit like that film, I think, Delia, Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. Yeah, so great contribution as always. And your last point about different models, okay, let's just reiterate. And in answer to your question, Mike Winter, no, there isn't an Indian partner. This is not classic T&E. I think one of the, I was going to say brave, that has pejorative connotations. One of the really innovative things Southampton did was to say, we're going to pick a model that works for us. And what they wanted was a commercial partner who could complement the things that they brought. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. There was an earlier question I want to ask Andrew to reflect on, if I may. And I know it was absolutely part of the Southampton vision for a comprehensive campus. T&R, yeah, we talk about T&E because our model has been delivery of education, teaching, but actually T&R is absolutely at the centre of the Southampton vision. Could you share with us a little bit of your thinking, Andrew, in this area? Because you've done some really thoughtful articulation of how that's going to develop. And as you said, Delia, link into the employability and enterprise agenda. Is that okay, Andrew?
Yeah, thanks, David. So you're absolutely right. We are a research-intensive institution, but all universities undertake research. So this may well apply to most universities on the call. We have been very clear that we expect academic staff to undertake research as well as teach, and that's from the outset. We've developed multiple mechanisms to do that. So we will be appointing to, as well as the academic provost and the director of learning and teaching, as key university roles, will also be appointing to a director of research and enterprise. We are working through the concept of the campus being a research platform for the research that we do in and on India via the India Centre, which we set up in 2019, which brings together around 100 academics across the university that have got significant amounts of activity and engagement on research in India. And we're beginning to develop research themes. So at the moment, some of the research themes relate to our Sustainability Resilience Institute, and so we're focused on air quality, which those of you in India know is something that there's work being done on that. Water quality and solid waste management. We're also looking at AI as a research theme. We're the convener for the UK Responsible AI Initiative, led by the government about 24 months ago. And we are very much wanting to focus those themes on areas of relevance and application to India. We're also investing in staff in the schools in the UK to work on collaborative research with colleagues in the India campus. And going back to Mike's question in a different way, David's absolutely right in terms of operating the campus on a day-to-day basis. OIG is our partner. We have multiple other partners where we are developing research collaboration opportunities with Indian universities, not just in Greater Delhi, but nationally. And we've been spending a lot of time with employers, both Indian and international, on building links, not just around graduate talent pipeline, also around research and development, research and innovation, organizational development and performance, impact on the community, and CSR activities. So there are multiple partners there. Those employer partners will enable the research agenda, because one of the key questions and issues for an international campus is how do you fund research when you're not in the dual funding mechanism enabled by QR funding through the REF in the UK. And so we're looking at opportunities for research grant acquisition and research grant funding that makes sense in an Indian environment, which may well include access to the National Research Fund when it's fully implemented. Already includes conversations with donors around philanthropic funding of research, and will entail reinvestment of resources generated in India into research, particularly, but not only, around joint PhD programs with Indian institutions.
That's great, Andrew. And I think last time we talked about the origination of this policy being market liberalisation and economic development growth. I know, Alison, whether you could tell us a little bit more about that policy, so that people then can think about how they orientate themselves and think about the model. And then perhaps, Dina, I could ask you to come in and talk about innovation and enterprise. What's it mean on the ground?
Yeah, sure. So India is has a very strong innovation and entrepreneurship sort of culture running through the DNA. There's even a word for it in Hindi, which some people might know, jugaad, although that has a slightly different connotation, but it's very much part of the DNA. I think very similar to us in the UK. India recently really skyrocketed up the rankings in the Global Innovation Index from, I think, 81st in 2015 to 39th very recently. There's very, very strong, robust support for innovation and for the innovation ecosystem from the Government of India and from state governments. That's in terms of sort of mission-led investments, investments for universities to set up tinkering labs, they're called, under a whole range of different programs and schemes. There's a Startup India innovation, Make in India innovation. There's Digital India, significant digital innovation and scale up happening across the country in different ways, particularly in telecoms and banking and retail. So it's an area of significant focus for the government. The IP context is tricky, but it's definitely getting more robust. And significant focus across different sectors, including the creative industries and medicine and health. What else to say? I think really what we're seeing is that many Indian universities are have a very strong community-led engagement, and they're getting much better at stronger industry engagement, with many different industries actually setting up their own universities and linking into community employment needs in particular parts of the country. So I think the Leicester example is a good one, because that's a partnership with Apollo University. UCL have also got a new partnership looking at medical tech and technology and research with AIIMS, which is a leading government hospital in Delhi, and with IIT Delhi. So, very, very strong ground for innovation.
Fantastic, Alison. And going back to your point, Andrew, Delia, maybe you could talk a little bit about how that complementary focus of expertises works. So Andrew's linking with corporates and developing that research agenda, building the innovation brand identity. Oxford International will be responsible for delivering those work experience and internship opportunities. How is that unfolding?
Well, I think it's working alongside the university and working in a complementary way. So as Andrew said, the university has a well-established India Centre. They have established research links across industry, and all of those are being brought together to support this enterprise that we're engaged in. But also, as Andrew said, they're spearheading new relationships, reaching out to corporates, alongside that, we are building the infrastructure within the professional services in the campus to focus on employability and entrepreneurship. That's already part of an integrated curriculum that will be coming across from Southampton, because the courses will reflect what is done at Southampton, although there will be contextualization of those. So we are building the infrastructure that will sit around that will interface with the students, and that will enable them to take opportunities for internships, projects as part of their academic experience, in entrepreneurship and enterprise, very much at the heart of what the campus will do. And there are spaces within the campus where that will be able to be sort of explored, interdisciplinary and cross-disciplinary. One of the joys of being involved in a startup university like this is it's not overwhelmingly huge. I mean, it's going to be a good size, but it's not huge. So those connections, those networks can happen organically, can be sort of encouraged in different ways. We're also, where it's positioned, is very much in the heart of, you know, sort of a business innovation area. We're out in Gurgaon, as everybody knows, Gurgaon, and but on a park where you've got lots of innovative and when you go and you walk around, you see lots of young people. You know, it's very sort of buzzy around there, and it just, I think, reflects that commitment to offering those opportunities. So we're very much looking at making sure that we're tied into strong employability, placements, internships with Indian universities are amazing. I spent many years in the early parts of the 2010s telling Indian applicants that we were not going to find them a job. In Indian universities, that is a very, very important part of the offer. So what we have to do, working, obviously Southampton is leading this, is articulate that we will give you the skills that you need, but we will also now be moving into, you know, sort of making sure that you are able to get those links, those placements, because that will make this investment a clear advantage for you in terms of coming and studying the Southampton degree in India. Many Indian universities, as Alison said, have, you know, moved very, very quickly in the past 10 years or so, establishing their own incubator hubs. There's all sorts of different ways that are going on, and, you know, we will be offering those in the same way that they're offered in the UK at Southampton.
Okay, so Arushi, could I come to you then? In that the delivery of education globally is pretty highly regulated for very obvious reasons. You know, some of these other add-on activities and obviously research, you know, less so. Are there particular legal or governance issues that you could advise people to look at early doors? Because as Andrew said, everybody does research. It's an important part of scholarship. So how do people go about putting a framework in place that meets their strategic objectives and is compliant?
Sure, David. So if you trace the history of India strategically and historically, Indian universities have never been research focused. It is only now with the NEP that there is an increased focus to set up research centers, the universities to become multidisciplinary in nature. It's not that it is not in a DNA that, you know, one shouldn't be research focused, but our curriculums in our university no flexibility of choosing electives on most occasions, but that's all changed now with you know, with the plans that have been rolled out in the past few years. Students can pretty much, you know, take industry courses and get credits for it. They can do multiple courses and then they can get, you know, minor courses, major courses, and get credit for it. As far as research and innovation is concerned, honestly, there are no single regulations, but like Alison mentioned, there are many initiatives that are taking place. There's a big push that universities should focus on research, and with foreign universities coming in, I think that's just going to go exponential because we're going to learn from the culture and imbibe it very quickly. From a grant perspective, I think one challenge that we see is on many occasions when we are looking at research and innovation, it requires a lot of money. It requires grants. And the question is, where is the funding coming from? Now, India to India, honestly, is not really a problem because, it's a domestic sort of a funding. But at any juncture, when you're looking at a foreign funding, like I was saying earlier, there are strict regulations around it. Those permissions aren't forthcoming. So then we step in as legal advisors to structure the arrangement such that monies come in and you're not in violation of law. There are also your tax consideration. The last point I would mention is that, a necessary outcome of your research and innovation is your IP generation. So patent filings, your design filings, trademark protections, etc. Very important if you want to scale it up. That's also not, India has not done very well in that sphere, but past 10 years, 15 years have seen a sea change. Number of patent applications have gone up. There's a lot of transparency built into our public platforms where you can see the patents being granted. There's been a speed up of grant of applications. So I think that's the critical part because you need to have some patent at the end of the day, which sort of validates your research or some, innovation, some copyright generation at the end of the day, even if it's not a patent material, which basically helps you bring value to what you have done. So maybe I'll stop here with that.
Okay, thank you, Rishi. And as we know around the world, that focus on research and STEM core to everybody. But of course, we need to recognise the universities need to be comprehensive. And I wondered, Andrew, if you might comment, because there have been several questions in the chat about portfolio. Obviously, you're starting with business and computer science, but you're determined to build a comprehensive university. Could you say something about the role of the arts, humanities and social sciences in your vision for India, which has a particular context, and then perhaps more broadly in your T&E strategy, if that's appropriate?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's Chris and others asked questions about the subject mix and the portfolio in the Q&A in the chat. So the starting point for us is that the University of Southampton Delhi campus is a campus of the University of Southampton. So we're not particularly supportive of the concept of a branch campus. This is a campus of the university that happens to be, in this case, in Greater Delhi. And that's really important. What that means is that the courses that the students study are the same as those in Southampton in the UK. The degrees they are awarded are the same. And if you take that ethos as a core part of your approach, what it effectively means is you end up logically in a place where any campus, wherever it is, should reflect the other campuses, and therefore, in terms of portfolio, should be as comprehensive or approaching as comprehensive as existing campuses. There are some real physical constraints about that. You have to be of a certain size footprint to be able to do every single course. Some courses programs have lab requirements that are expensive to invest in. So there is a pragmatic realism around that. But going back to the India campus, based on that logic, we're moving quickly from the 3 core subject areas that make up the most enrollment demand in India. And those are, as David said, well, actually, in order of enrollments, it's engineering largest, business second largest, computing third largest. In order of growth of enrollments, so in terms of future trajectory, it's computer science with increasing elements of AI is the fastest growing area, followed by business, followed by engineering. But you look at the share of demand across subject areas beyond STEM and beyond business, and it's significant in India and it's growing rapidly in areas. So we've got a very clear rollout plan, for example, for most of the programs, or a significant proportion of the programs, for in art and design from Winchester School of Arts, which is part of the university. And that's very much around creativity, creative in India. There are areas of humanities around language and literatures, which very much talk to the cultural landscape in India and demand from students. So our view is that for an international campus to be successful, it has to reflect the home campus, and therefore that means it has to be as comprehensive as possibly can be. In practical terms, we'll end up over the first 10 years offering around 2/3 of the subject areas that we offer in the UK. There are some really interesting debates to be had about healthcare more broadly. If you look at the proportions of doctors per 10,000 population or nurses per 10,000 population. There's a significant need for growth in healthcare professionals, and an opportunity as well, but health, life sciences, biochemistry, biotechnology as a broad area is something of real interest, but will need navigation to work through, particularly, for example, for a medical school where there are accreditations and placements that would be required. So we need to recognise the reality and the complexity of delivery of some of these subjects, as well as the aspiration to be as comprehensive as we possibly can be.
Fantastic. And Alison, perhaps I could come to you in that obviously Britain and the British Council promote the role or the size of the arts and the creative industries and our world-class position in that. Are you able to talk about how that gets framed and policy perspective as you talk to the governments in India?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, I would just agree with Andrew around the opportunities in the health sector, medical nurses, and to pick up on Jazz's point in the chat, that the opportunities for British students to come here and to do practicals and have field experience, I think, is something that's really, really valuable. Very diverse and really interesting opportunities here, and that's definitely a model that I know UK universities are looking at very closely, particularly in South India, which is very strong in the sort of medical sector, nursing sector, veterinary sector, for example. Arts and culture. So the G20, the very first time, it was the very first time that the Prime Minister had used the phrase the cultural and creative industries as being a priority for India. And it was a part of the declaration of the G20 culture track to focus on that. So there is a big initiative to build a strategic approach to harnessing the power of the creative industries to support SDGs and to support livelihoods, but also protecting and preserving India's cultural heritage. So there are pockets of expertise. You have gaming and VR and augmented reality, and some really fantastic industries in South India, in Hyderabad, in Bangalore. But there's a real dearth of opportunities for students to study some of these particular areas. So that is definitely something that is worth exploring. If you're a UK university offering architecture, textile design, anything to do with sustainability, great opportunities in India, I think. Back office, theatre, lighting, sound production, all of those areas too.
Okay, great stuff. All of which is dependent on having fantastic infrastructure. And I don't just mean the physical infrastructure, though you talked about the importance of labs, Andrew. Delia, you talked about recruitment of staff. Okay, challenging. I did 3 overseas campuses. It's not easy. Perhaps you could, never did India actually, so maybe you could share where you are with that. And then also recruitment. I mean, I've said before, I'll go on record, UK universities are rubbish at recruiting to T&E operations. Happy to debate that with anybody down the pub. Okay, Southampton's doing well because it's got a fantastic brand, good partner. Could you talk a little bit more about how we're going to address the recruitment issue for some of those universities that maybe don't have the pulling power of Southampton or a partner like Oxford International that can help them to recruit?
Yeah, I think the thing is, you've just touched on a number of it there, that there is no need to do this on your own. There are lots of partners, and you can have partners, institutions in India that will help you with the recruitment of students. If you are an institution that does not want to, or does not have the resource that's needed to support this type of full-scale development, then trying to share that with a partner in India might be a way for you to think about this, and that can help also ease the recruitment burden in terms of students because they have their own infrastructure. I think one of the things that was interesting to me in being out in India before Christmas with colleagues from Southampton was the level of interest we had from students and parents. They are very interested in this opportunity to study a UK qualification at home in India for a whole range of different reasons. That they are definitely committed to the quality of the education, and that was a big draw. That this was, a top 100 university coming into India was a massive draw for those students coming to hear about the plans and what was going to be on offer. So I think that that's definitely the case. I think in terms of academic staff, again, in India, and colleagues have touched on this before, there wasn't necessarily, and this is, a very big generalization. There are amazing pockets of excellent research in India, the IITs, etc. But across the board, if you looked at a range of universities, then maybe it wasn't that research culture. There aren't enough PhDs. So India is desperately under-resourced in terms of PhDs to grow the domestic higher education delivery. So that is sort of a big gap, and that is something that academics are excited about, the opportunity to be able to be part of this. So we've had lots of applications. We're in the process at the moment of working with colleagues in Southampton to manage that process. A really high level of interest from India and from outside of India, as Andrew said earlier, which is fantastic, because it's not just the UK that's focusing on India. Lots and lots of countries around the world. Alison touched on the Australians already doing stuff, but France, Germany, the USA, Canada is looking at engaging with India in a different way because of the problems they've had. So there is a huge amount of international interest in what's going on in India. So it's not just one country with their story. And we have seen applications from, continents, including Africa, people wanting to come to India because of the excitement and the opportunities that they see in helping India achieve what's been set out for 2047. So I do think that we are lucky that there is this appetite for what we're doing, and that's both in terms of staff and also students. But nothing is ever straightforward or easy. You've got to work at it. So that's what I would say, and I would agree with you that TNE recruitment has always been a problem. This isn't, in the sense, this is different from the TNE that maybe we were recruiting to in other countries. This particular thing is because this is, as Andrew said, it is a campus of the university. It's not a branch campus. It's not a teaching centre. This is something different. And that's, something to bear in mind. But having said that, there are other models that will meet the needs of different groups of
okay, so I'm going to ask
ask
every panelist then to sum up with one key point. I'm just going to insert myself and say, yes, the Australians are coming. They went into Southeast Asia and got a bloodied nose, actually, because actually they're not as sophisticated as we are. Sorry for my colleagues in Australia. There was also an argument that because they didn't have the historical legacy in India, that would position them better. I think we are more sophisticated in it, and so I would ask everybody then to give me their final comments before we wrap up on time. The one thing that you feel that people that go away from the seminar should know that we haven't covered, or that really want to hammer home. Got 2 minutes. Andrew, maybe I could start with you.
Yeah, so I'm going to be typical academic. I'm not going to follow the rules quite. I'm going to talk about two things. So I think the first thing is we've talked a lot about partnership in different ways. However you engage with India, and the base for this is that India is one of the 2-3 most important countries to engage with as an education institution globally. Embed yourself in the ecosystem through multiple partnerships and relationships and become part of India. And I think there have been universities from the north who haven't understood that being embedded and being part of the infrastructure and the ecosystem is the most important way, not only of being successful, but of demonstrating and showing that respect and learning from the experience, firstly. And the second one, and just to reinforce it, despite all the excitement, the reality is these things only work if they are delivered as efficiently and effectively and professionally as they possibly could do. And for Brand UK, which is to some extent what we are on this call today, it's really important that all the projects that are developed and delivered in India do that, because that will enhance our brand if we do it well and we do it professionally.
Okay, so Alison next, and then Arushi with something practical around governance. So Alison.
I think Andrew's last point was probably my most important. So, representing the whole of the UK and building the reputation of the whole of our sector is a key part of the work that we do across the whole of government, and it's really important. And I think being able to do that well, we love to hear from you. We love to know what you're doing. We love to help connect you to the right people. So stay in touch, and the intercultural competence that we can advise you on is something that I think quite unique that we can offer.
Great. We all love the British Council. Larushi, last
Yes.
point for you.
Yes, I have two very quick points to make. One, from a practical perspective, I forgot to mention this. If you're looking at India, I think there are various state governments, specifically Karnataka and Uttar Pradesh, who are offering incentives on stamp duty and various other things. So if you're looking at setting up a campus in India, then maybe a good idea to take care of your, the best incentives that the various states have to offer to entice you to set up a campus. The second thing is more of a personal sort of an agenda here. As a mother of a young child, I'd be very happy if foreign universities come into, and I've been mooting about this for a long time. But if I don't have to send my child abroad, and Adelia mentioned that, I'll be very happy if the universities can come right next door and offer these courses. And the more variety they bring to the table, the better it is, right? Like, I mean, in India, we have all grown up learning about how we should just be engineers or lawyers or doctors. Like, these were our three top choices. One of the three, maybe at some level, somebody would do arts. But if you can bring liberal art programs, then I saw some of these questions here. Please do. I think it's an evolving environment. It's a developing ecosystem. If you can help generate some jobs around it, I don't think there is any end to the opportunity here.
Okay, fantastic. What a wonderful note on which to finish. Thank you very much to this incredibly expert and esteemed panel who've kindly made time. And let's give them a virtual round of applause. And say, if you've got any further questions, please email me or the team at UK International, and we'll be happy to respond. Who knows? We may do a third one of these if we're invited back by public acclamation. Okay, at that point, thank you very much, everybody. It's been a fantastic session. I've learned a lot. Bye now.